Hello class, it's me again, your instructor for another video recording. And for today, we are going to continue on chapter 2 of your learning module. So please, if you have a question, you can just type it on our comment section. If you don't like, again, you can raise it when we are going to have our synchronous session. And there, so we are going to answer it and we will be discussing it as a class. So that's it. I hope that you will watch this video till the end. In this video, we are going to proceed with chapter 2 of your learning module. So chapter 2 of your learning module, it is all about the fundamental concepts and principles of criminology. So to start with, we are going to have first the important terms in the study of criminology that you must familiarize because you will be encountering these terms often as we proceed in our subject. Number 1 here is the so-called criminogenic processes. So criminogenic processes, it is the processes that explain human behavior and experiences in order for us to determine the nature of a person's personality. So here, it is emphasized the term human behavior. So it is somewhat related to psychology because psychology, it is the study of human behavior and in relation to experiences because experiences of a person has something to do on his behavior. Diba? Okay, so mga karanasan ng isang tao, meron po yang epekto sa bawat sa mga attitude na pinapakita niya or kung paano siya gumalaw or kung paano siya mag-behave. Okay, an example. We have here a family or a kid that grows up in a happy and sabihin natin a good family. Okay, and then on the other hand, we have a child or a kid that is a member of a poor and disorganized or broken family. Sabihin natin na ganon. So with that, the kid who grows up, let's try to focus more on the, or let's try to focus first on the kid that is a member of a good family or a happy family. So with that, the kid surely or has the higher tendency that he might adopt good behaviors. Okay? Kasi nga yun, masayahin yung pamilya niya, mga nakikita niya or mga pinapakita ng family members na kinabibilangan niya is magagandang gawain or pagiging masayahin. So with that, of course, dahil sa yun yung palagi niyang nakikita sa kanyang paligid, then yan yung i-adapt niya. Unlike on the other hand, meron yung bata na lumaki or membro ng isang mahirap at disorganized or mga or yung sabihin natin na broken family. Okay, ano kaya ang magiging epekto nun sa isang bata? So, araw-araw nakikita niya, nag-aaway yung nanay at tatay niya, nag-aaway yung kapatid niya or mga kapatid niya. So, with that, makikita niya yung violence. So, tendency, a greater chance na mas ma-adapt niya yung pagiging violente. Okay, so, yun, experiences of a person has something to do is very much related to human behavior or kung paano siya mag-behave. Okay, or yung mga attitude na mga ina-adapt niya. And with that, we are going to relate it also in criminogenic processes. We are going to relate it in the infringement, okay, or in the so-called, okay, because infringe is a term that is so related or that is same as to crimes, okay, or in other words, violations of laws or contradicting the laws, okay, or the contradicting the law. So with that, we are going to try to determine, or we are going to try to relate it. Kasi, yun, balikan natin yung bata na lumaki sa isang broken family. So yun, since violence yung puro na nakikita niya, yung araw-araw niya na nakikita, then na-adapt niya yung pagiging violente. So yun, in the future, he might be also in the future, he will be having a higher tendency to become a criminal or become a law violator. Okay? Yun nga. Dahil dun sa na-adapt niya usually ay mga behavior ng isang criminal or behavior ng isang pagiging violente. So that is the effect. So that is what is meant by criminogenic processes. So next, we are going to proceed with the so-called criminal psychodynamics. Under criminal psychodynamics naman, we are going to study of mental it refers to the study of mental processes of criminals in action. So in comparison with the term that we have discussed a while ago, criminogenic processes, it is focused on human behaviors in relation to experiences of the person. With here, or in this term naman, we are going to study mental processes. So, yung isipan mismo or yung pag-iisip ng isang tao. Okay, the mind of a person. So, take note, it is specifically mentioned criminal psychodynamics. So, we are not having the broad term, but we are going to focus specifically on criminal mind. Okay, yung pag-iisip ng isang criminal. So in other words, we are going to study here, or this is the study of genesis, development, and motivation of human behavior that conflicts with accepted norms and standards of society. So yung genesis po dyan is, in other words, origin. Okay, so we are going to study the origin. So the origin has something to do with the motive. So bakit kaya niya pinatay si Mr. X? Bakit kaya? Okay, so malamang yung motibo niya is revenge. So dahil siguro si Mr. X inagaw niya yung jowa niya, kaya nagawa niyang patayin. Okay. Or bakit kaya si Mr. Y pinatay niya or sabihin natin binugbog niya si Mr. X? Okay, so malamang ang reason na naman revenge, or kung hindi man dahil sa trip lang niya or pagkatuwaan lang. So yung motibo niya pagkatuwaan lang yung tao. So still hindi po 'yun excuse sa batas natin. Still he will be criminally liable of physical injuries or of the physical injuries that he inflicted on that person. Okay. So another one, hindi lang po yun yung mga origin or mga motibo usually ng mga mga criminals, di ba? So meron din yung tinatawag natin na economic gain usually. Okay? Economic gain yung parang kita. Okay? Kasi meron yung mga ibang tao ginagamit ang crime, or they are committing crimes as a means of livelihood para sila ay mabuhay. Okay? So yun, napakarami pang origin or mga motibo ng bawat criminal. Okay? Hindi lang iisa. So there, don't forget or just keep in mind, under criminal psychodynamics, we are going to focus more on the mental processes or the mentality of the criminal person. And while on the criminogenic processes, just take note, it is focused on human behavior in relation to experiences or in relation to an experience of that certain person. So, to proceed with, we have here the so-called or the term cultural conflict naman. So, simply, cultural conflict, it is a clash between societies. So, in our society, let's say here in the Philippines, napakaraming tribo or napakaraming sabihin natin subcultures, okay, or subgroups, di ba? Meron dyan Kapampangan, meron pa dyan Ilocano, meron din dito sa Pilipinas mga Cebuano. Okay? And then sa part naman ng Visayas, Central Visayas, mga Tagalog. Okay? And then yun, bawat subgroups na yun or mga bawat grupo ng tao na yun is meron silang iba't ibang paniniwala, di ba? Meron silang iba't ibang paniniwala, meron silang iba't ibang perception. Okay? So kung dito sa gamitin natin as an example with the Highlander and Lowlander. So, somewhere in Cordillera and then here in, sabihin natin, Central Visayas, particularly here in Cavite. So, kung dito sa Cavite, normal lang sa atin ang magmura. Okay, or natural lang, or sanay na tayo sa pagmumura. Okay, sabihin natin na ganun, di ba? Usually naman, di ba, sanay ang mga sanay tayo na yun, nagsasabi, putang ina mo. Sorry for the word. Meron din yung iba, anak ka ng teteng. Mga ganun na term. Tayo, naririnig natin sa mga kasama natin, sa mga barkada natin, sinasabihan tayo ng ganun. Eh, bobo. Mga ganun. Normal lang, di ba? Or hindi masyadong masakit sa atin. But, in highlands, particularly in Cordillera, those terms are not acceptable. Okay? So, not all people or not all persons who are in Highlanders accept those kinds of terms or kinds of language. Okay? So, yun. Try mong pumunta sa Baguio. Go in Baguio and then dun ka magmura-mura. Okay? Makipag-away ka dun, magmura-mura ka dun. Actually, in Baguio, they have an ordinance that punishes a person or punishes yung mga pagmumura na yun. Okay? So, bawal pong magmura sa Baguio. Meron silang ordinansa na pinasa about dyan. So, be careful if it happens that you visit in Baguio, make sure that you observe or you don't adapt or wag mong dalhin doon yung kultura mo. Okay? Na yun, nandun ka sa kalsada, sa public, and then magmumura-mura ka doon. Hindi po pwede yun. So, that is I'm pointing there is the difference, di ba? Magkakaiba-iba tayo. Even though nasa Pilipinas tayo, yun nga, magkakaiba-iba pa rin yung bawat paniniwala ng isang grupo. Okay? So, with that, dahil sa magkakaiba-iba tayo ng paniniwala, or magkakaiba tayo ng traditions, mga languages, kung minsan hindi tayo nagkakaintindihan. Okay? Meron na yung tinatawag natin na conflicts and misunderstandings. Okay? So, yun yung parang makikita nyo dyan sa picture. So, here in Asia, di ba? Usually, particularly sa mga Japanese, mga Chinese, and other Asian races, the way that they are going to show respect or to show greetings is through bowing. And on the western part of Earth, sa western part, 'di ba, usually they show respect or greetings through handshake. So mapapansin nyo dyan sa picture, ayun, hindi sila magkaintindihan. So with that, meron ng misunderstanding. Baka sa isip ng babae, ano ba naman to? Hindi man lang ako kinamayan, di ba? Naranasan nyo bang mag-alok ng handshake and then hindi kayo pinansin? Di ba? It hurts or it means something na disrespectful. Okay, so parang ganun yung mangyayari dyan. So, effect na yan, it could cause also cultural conflict, or it could be an example of the origin or the causes of the so-called cultural conflict. So, not only in that, but also with the traditions na sinasabi natin or beliefs. And next, let us proceed with dementia precox. So, we have here the so-called dementia precox. Ito naman tinatawag nila in other words as premature dementia, or kung hindi man, the so-called precocious madness. And then third, or yung common term na nila or modern terminology na nila is the so-called schizophrenia. So, magkakapare-parehas lang po yan. Dementia precox, premature dementia, precocious madness, and then the schizophrenia, yan po ay isa lamang. Okay? So, ano ba ang mga ito, or ano ba ito, dementia precox? So, ito ay it says here, a mental disorder that begins at or shortly after puberty. So, it begins somewhere at the age of 12, okay, usually, and leads to general failure of the mental faculties with corresponding physiological impairment. So, the one that is being affected here is the mind or the brain or the mentality of the person. So, ano ba yung mga symptoms dyan? So here, we have the symptoms of schizophrenia. So, it is classified into two. First, there is the so-called positive, and then the second one is the so-called negative. So hindi po ibig sabihin na positive and negative ay meron pong magandang naidudulot and then mayroong hindi magandang naidudulot ang sakit na schizophrenia. So hindi po yun yung ibig sabihin niya. Positive po ang ibig sabihin po niyan, it is present in someone with schizophrenia na hindi po natin maoobserbahan yan or hindi natin yan makikita sa isang normal na tao na walang karamdaman ng schizophrenia. Okay, so ano nga ba ang example nun? Ang example po nun is the so-called delusion. So ang delusion po na yan, it is somewhat related to anxiety. Okay, excessive anxiety. So sobra pong pagiging matakutin, maalalahanin. So palaging nag-aalala. Okay, nawala namang mabigat na rason or walang rason. So pagiging matakutin, maalalahanin, okay, or in other words, parang negative thinker siya. So parang ganun po yung ibig sabihin ng delusion. So yan po ay isang sintomas ng dementia precox. Pero yan, hindi po dapat yan makikita or hindi natin yan maobserbahan sa isang normal na tao na walang karamdaman nito. Another positive symptoms of schizophrenia is the so-called hallucination. So, sa hallucination naman, dito po ang apektado ay yung senses mo. Okay? So, nadi-deteriorate na po yung perception and then senses mo dito. So, hindi na normal yung pandama mo. Okay? And then, we have the other positive symptoms of schizophrenia, disorganized speech. So, hindi na maayos yung pakikipag-usap mo or hindi mo na ma-express ng normal or may salita yung mga naiisip mo ng normal. Okay? Or ng tama. So, those are the some of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia. So, tandaan nyo po sa positive symptoms, yan po ay nararamdaman or pwedeng maobserbahan natin sa mga taong nakaka-experience or meron itong schizophrenia na ito. Pero yung mga simptomas na ito, hindi po ito usual or hindi natural na maobserbahan natin sa mga normal na tao na walang karamdaman nitong sakit na to. Okay, and then for negative symptoms naman, ang ibig sabihin po niyan is a person is experiencing an absence or reduction of a certain traits that are often present in healthier individuals. So, itong mga negative symptoms naman po ito, pwede po ito nating maobserbahan or pwede po itong makita natin sa mga taong normal or walang sakit ng dementia precox. Okay, so ano ba ang example nun? We have here the first one, flattened effect. So, ang ibig sabihin po niyang flattened effect na yan, yung hindi niya masyadong ini-express yung emotions niya. Okay, so kunwari, nagpapatawa yung teacher, pero hindi niya magawang ngumiti man lang or magawang tumawa. Okay, so yun ay isang negative symptoms po ng schizophrenia. Pero hindi po ibig sabihin na pag ganun yung isang tao ay sabihin mo na agad, i-conclude mo na agad ay siya ay may schizophrenia. No, kasi yan lamang po ay negative symptoms. So, katulad nga ng sabi natin kanina, negative symptoms pwedeng these are symptoms present to a person experiencing schizophrenia. Pero pwede rin nating maobserbahan sa mga normal na tao na walang karamdaman ng schizophrenia. So, yun yung pagkakaiba niya dun sa positive. Okay? So, yun, flattened effect. Aside from that, reduced speech. So, hindi na siya ganong nakikipag-usap or hindi na siya ganong nagsasalita. So, possible meron siyang schizophrenia. Okay? Yun nga lang, wag mo agad i-conclude na naman na siya ay merong schizophrenia porket hindi kanya kinakausap or madalas tahimik lang siya. So, yun, hindi po yun ibig sabihin na ganun na meron na siyang schizophrenia. Okay? So, sadyang meron din talaga yung mga kaibigan natin, di ba, na hindi masyadong nakikipagkwento or palakwento. Okay? Pero yun po ay normal lang kasi yun nga natural sa kanya or yun ay behavior na niya or ugali na niyang or traits na niya yung ganon. Okay? So, hindi mo siya agad i-judge na meron siyang schizophrenia. And then we have here the so-called lack of initiative. Okay? So, lack of initiative, kailangan man lang sabihan bago siya gumalaw. Okay? maghugas ka na ng pinggan, saka lang siya gagalaw. Or sabihin natin, kain ka na, saka lang siya kakain. Okay, wala siyang initiative na kapag nagutom siya, kakain siya. Or initiative na kapag nakita niyang may kailangan siyang gawin, igawin niya. Hindi. Yun yung sinasabi natin na lack of initiative. Okay? So, yung lack of initiative, pwede rin natin yan maobserbahan sa mga ibang tao or normal na tao, di ba? Meron yung mga kapatid natin dyan or kayo mismo. Di ba? Kung minsan kailangan pa kayong pagalitan ng nanay ninyo para lang gawin ninyo yung mga gawaing bahay. Di ba? So, yun, wala kayong initiative na kapag nakita nyo, napakarami ng naipon na pinggan dyan na kailangang hugasan, hindi nyo man lang maisip hugasan, di ba? That is lack of initiative. So, yun yung pagkakaiba ng negative with positive symptoms. Okay? So, I hope that you got my point. So, with that, we are going to proceed with the other next term. Here is the so-called delusion. So, delusion is a false belief about self caused by morbidity or abnormality. It is present in paranoia and dementia precox. So, as we have mentioned a while ago, it is one of the positive symptoms of the so-called dementia precox or schizophrenia. And itong delusion na to, it is also considered as a paranoid disorder. So, sobrang pagiging matatakotin or maalalahanin. So, somewhat negative thinker as we have said a while ago. Okay, so another one, it is a false beliefs that conflict with reality. So dito rin, parang iniisip niya lagi na siya ay walang kwenta. Okay, sa sarili niya, iniisip niya wala siyang kwenta. Or sa isip niya, walang nagmamahal, parang ganoon. But actually, merong nagmamahal sa kanya. Okay, so he is experiencing delusion. Okay, so that is the so-called delusion. Now, we are going to have the episodic criminal. So, episodic criminal is actually or considered not to be a criminal. So, sa totoo lamang po, hindi po natin na masasabi na yung taong to ay isang kriminal. Bakit kaya? So, he is a person who commits a crime when under extreme emotional stress. Okay? So, dahil dyan, dahil sa pagiging sobrang stress or emotionally stressed siya or emotionally disturbed, nagawa niyang pumatay ng tao, okay, or nagawa niyang gumawa ng krimen. So, they are classified as an episodic type of criminal. Okay? So, yan lamang po ang tinutukoy ng episodic criminal na yan. And then the next one, we have here the so-called erotomania. So, what is erotomania? So, simply, it is a morbid propensity to love or make love. So, when it speaks of morbid or morbidity, it is something to do or it is synonymous to abnormalities. So, yun, morbid propensity to love or make love or excessive sexual desire. Okay, so meron yung mga tao na ganito, di ba? Sobrang addict na addict. Okay, hindi ko lang masabi kung saan na ay hindi ko lang may banggit na actually yung word. Okay, addict na addict saan? Okay, sexual desire na lang. Okay, or excessive sexual desire na lang yung gamitin natin. So, those person are so-called or termed as erotomania. I mean, that feeling, okay, that abnormality is termed as erotomania. Okay? So, yan po yung tinutukoy natin dyan na erotomania. Next one here is the so-called hereditary. So, simply naman ang hereditary, it is the transmission of or capable of passing naturally from parent to offspring through the genes. So, dito na po yung transmission of genes na sinasabi natin. Okay? So, physical traits of your parents usually namamana mo. Okay? Yung hugis ng mukha ng parents mo, okay, ng nanay mo or tatay mo, nakukuha mo yan or na-adapt mo. Okay, not only physical traits, okay, mga mata, okay, or itsura ng mata, hugis ng mata, kulay ng mata, o kulay ng buhok. Not only physical traits, but there are researches also, they are saying that the so-called yung mga behaviors, okay, behaviors ng mga parents, pwedeng mamana ng mga anak, okay? So, yun po yung sinasabi natin na hereditary. Just take note here, capability of passing naturally from parent to offspring through the genes na sinasabi natin. Okay? So, that's it for hereditary. Another term here is the so-called hallucination. We have mentioned it a while ago already. So, an individual is with a strongly self-centered pattern of emotion, fantasy, and thought. Okay, so hallucination, it is something to do also. It has something to do with deterioration of perception. Wherein, kung minsan, meron tayo yung mga napanood, di ba? Napapanood, wherein yung mga taong nakaka-experience ng hallucination, meron dyan yung mga bagay-bagay na hindi dapat kinakain, ay kinakain nila. Okay, so yun, akala niya, or it's because akala niya is yun ay pagkain, but actually, in reality ay hindi. Okay, so another one, this so-called hallucination is na-experience yan usually ng mga addicts sa what we so-called marijuana. Okay, yung cannabis sativa na sinasabi nila, yung marijuana. So, ano ba yung naidudulot nun? So, yun, parang lumilipad sila, pakiramdam daw nila, lumilipad sila. Okay, pakiramdam nila, nakaupo sila sa ulap, okay, natutulog sa ulap, mga ganon. So, deterioration of perception. So, yun ay isang example po ng hallucination. So, that is all about hallucination. Next, we have here the so-called kleptomania. So, what is kleptomania? Isa rin po ito ay may tuturing natin na isang disorder po ito. Okay? Behavioral disorder. Bakit? Sabi dito, it is an uncontrollable morbid propensity to steal or pathological stealing. So, yun. Hindi niya mapigilan yung sarili niya, yung kamay niya na magnakaw. Okay? Or kumuha ng mga gamit na hindi naman sa kanya. Okay? So, that is a disorder or what we so-called as kleptomania. So, yun po yung mga, yun po yung sinasabi natin na kleptomania. Okay? So, next one, we have the so-called masochism naman. So, sa masochism, it is more on a sexual, it is a condition of sexual perversion in which a person derives pleasure from being dominated or cruelly treated. So, sexual perversion po ito, a condition of sexual perversion. So, be matured enough. Wala po tayong, we are already in college, okay? Old enough na kayo para pag-usapan natin yung mga bagay-bagay na ito, okay? So, ito, kasi sa condition na ito, yung babae or yung lalaki or yung isang tao gustong-gusto niya or nakaka-achieve siya ng pleasure, okay? Parang gustong-gusto niya na sinasaktan siya habang engaging or nakikipag-engage in sexual intercourse. Okay? So, yun yung ibig sabihin po ng or term na masochism. So, yung sexual perversion deriving or having pleasure when being dominated habang sinasaktan siya ng partner niya. Okay? Kung ano-ano yung ginagawa ng partner niya na nakakasakit, kabaliktaran yung nararamdaman niya. Gustong-gusto niya or masaya siya pag ganun yung ginagawa ng partner niya. Kabaliktaran naman dito ay ang sadism. So, sa masochism, gustong-gusto niya, nasasaktan siya. Sa sadism, ito naman yung mga tao, gusto-gusto nilang sinasaktan yung partner nila while having sexual intercourse. So, derivation of sexual gratifications from infliction of physical pain po. Okay? So, yun po yung sadism and then masochism. Okay? So, yan po yung ibig sabihin niyan. Next is the so-called melancholia. What is melancholia? Simply, it is a mental disorder characterized by excessive brooding and depression of spirit. So, ito yung naman, sobrang malungkutin. Okay? Or sobrang hindi masyadong it's because of this feeling, hindi siya masyadong nakikipag-socialize. Usually, yung mga nakaka-experience ng ganito, mental disorder. So, excessive loneliness, okay, or depression. So, ito po yung sinasabi natin na melancholia. So, that is melancholia. We have here the next one, the so-called megalomania. Ano naman tong megalomania? As you can see in the picture, meron yung pusa, pero dun sa camera tingin niya, or dun sa mirror I should say, tingin niya sa sarili niya siya ay isang leon. So ito pong megalomania, it is a mental disorder in which the subject thinks himself great or exalted. So sobrang bossy yung tingin niya sa sarili niya. Mataas masyado yung tingin niya sa sarili niya. Just like in that picture. So with that, parang tingin niya king or boss siya. Okay? So excessive. Sobra yung pagtingin niya masyado dun sa sarili niya. So that is what we so called megalomania. Pero sometimes merong magandang effect yan. Okay? Parang pagiging positive din yan. Pero yan nga lang, pag sobra, sabi natin, hindi yan maganda. Okay? Magiging disorder na yan. So that is so-called megalomania. And then we have here the next one, necrophilism naman. So what is necrophilism? So simply, as you can see in the picture, meron po tayo dyan yung patay. So it is a morbid craving usually of an erotic nature for dead bodies. Okay, so person or a person who is experiencing this so-called necrophilism, so he usually loves or he likes having sexual perversion or sexual acts with a dead body. Okay, so yun, pakikipag-sexual intercourse or kung ano-ano man yung ginagawa niya dun sa katawan ng isang bangkay. So that is a disorder, and that is termed as necrophilism. We have here the so-called anthropology. So it is very familiar to you. So anthropology, it is a science, of course, to science related in the study of mankind and its development. So with that, we are going also to, you should need to keep that in mind, because in criminology we are going to we should also familiarize with anthropology. Familiarize ourselves with anthropology. Kasi yun nga, most of the time, ang biktima ay tao, di ba? Usually, yun yung inaaral natin. So, we need, if we investigate, we should need to know also ano ba yung mga bawat parte ng isang tao. Okay? Baka mamaya, hindi mo alam kung saan ba yung location ng abdomen ng isang tao. Okay? So, saan tumama yung bala ng baril? Sinabi ng isang tao, abdomen. Hindi mo naiintindihan kung ano yung abdomen. So, yun. Yung tinutukoy natin doon is yung tiyan. Okay? So, that is natin na disadvantage pag hindi mo yan alam. So, that's it. Anthropology. Okay? And then we have here the next one, the so-called autophobia. So, in autophobia, a fear of oneself or of being alone. So, dito naman, yung mga taong takot mapag-isa. Okay? Takot silang naiiwan or mag-isa sa isang suli or mag-isa sa isang lugar. Okay? So, they are termed as autophobia. Okay? Or yung feeling na yun is the so-called autophobia. And then we have here biometry. It is simply measuring or calculating of the probable duration of human life. Okay? So, the attempt to correlate the frequency of crime between parents and children or brothers and sisters. So, with that, that is the so-called biometry. Here we have the so-called biosocial behavior. Biosocial behavior naman, sabi dito, a person's biological heritage plus his environment and social heritage influence his social activity. So, it means, sabi natin nga kanina, physical traits or somewhat behaviors of a person or a child has something to do with heredity. Okay? Namamana natin sa parents. So, yun yung tinutukoy na bio. So, biological. So, it has something to do with genes. Okay? And then, we have here the social. So, dito naman yung environment sa labas na mismo. Yung ginagalawan ng bata. Okay? Yung mga nasa paligid ng bata. So, with that, social and biological and social has something to do with the behavior or how the kid or how a person behaves in a society. Okay? So, that is what is meant by biosocial behavior. So maybe some of you here don't agree with this, and then maybe some of you here will agree with this. Sabi po kasi dito, there is no crime when there is no law. Tama nga naman, di ba? Kung walang batas, then walang krimen. Kasi nga, ang pagkaka-define natin sa term na crime is it is an act in violation of law. Okay, so kung walang batas din, walang ma-violate. So meaning walang mangyayaring krimen. So parang yan po yung sinasabi ng logomacy. Okay, so yun lamang po. Sabi dyan, no crime when there is no law. So that is what we so-called, or that is the term logomacy. Okay, so we are going to discuss further as we proceed in our subject. Okay? Okay, so that ends our video recording for today. I hope that you learned something about this video. And please, if you have a question, you can just comment those on our comment section. But if you don't like, again, you can just have it when we are going to meet in our synchronous session. So you can raise it there, and then we will be discussing it as a class. So with that, I would like to say goodbye, and please take care everyone. See you on our synchronous session.